House Appropriations Subcommittee on Higher Education and Community College will come to order. Mr. Clerk, will you please take today's roll?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chair Markkinen.
Here.
Representative Roth. Here. Representative Jenkins-Arno. Here. Representative Mueller. Here. Representative Kuhn. Representative Longjohn. Here. Representative Rogers. Here. Mr. Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Roth moves to approve the minutes of March 19th, 2025 meeting. Being no objections, the minutes are approved. Today we have a presentation from Dr. Daniel Hurley, CEO of Michigan Association of State Universities. Thank you very much for being here today, and the floor is yours, sir.
Well, good afternoon, Chair Markkinen and Vice Chairs Roth and Longjohn and members of the committee. It's good to be here. It's good to see the sun outside, long overdue. So very much appreciate the opportunity to come before you today and hopefully set the stage for what comes next. It has been a few years since the university presidents and chancellors have come before you, and I think all in today in the weeks ahead, it's our hope that you'll have a better understanding of the Michigan higher education ecosystems and specifically of our public universities, in all that they're doing to contribute to the workforce, the Michigan economy, and your respective communities. Really have just two themes today. One is a discussion on the value of a college education and boosting our state's educational attainment rate and ROI back to the state. I think I have some pretty compelling data to that effect. And then, of course, some comments on the higher education budget. We are blessed with 15 public universities, a national and global reputation. I think metric for metric, we punch above our weight. We'll go head to head with any set of state public universities in the country. We have about 260,000 students enrolled as of this past fall. That is notable in that we stemmed the bleeding as a sector. Obviously, enrollment varies among the institutions, and I'll show you some enrollment data, demographic data, but we have had quite the slide especially since around 2013, but I think primarily courtesy of the Michigan Achievement Scholarship, we have essentially come in at a very modest, about 0.5% increase in enrollment over the last couple of years. And then we produce more than 67,000 degrees every year at all levels. Obviously, the emphasis is on undergraduate education with nearly 45,000 degrees, but a lot of graduate education taking place, master's, doctoral, and professional degrees. So these institutions are workforce engines throughout the state, but also to be recognized is the incredible generators of research, innovation, technology transfer, you name it. More than $3.3 billion of R&D spending in the latest data. Most of that is coming from the federal government, a big part coming from private industry, nonprofits, local and state governments. I know there's been some visibility given in this past year by some groups, I think Citizens Research Council, as well as University Research Corridor. We have on hand today Dr. Britt Effelter-Kane, who is the head of the University Research Corridor. Thanks for being with us. And they would note that we're kind of below, by far, the national average in terms of contributions to university research. And then a figure from the University Research Corridor, which now has 4 members. We are fortunate to have 4 Research 1-tier universities in the state with the addition of Michigan Tech. And from those institutions alone, $24 billion annual economic impact. And of course, it's amazing to see the work, the scientific discovery. It's really awe-inspiring. impacting life and health sciences, mobility, advanced manufacturing. So we're very pleased with that. So let me turn now to some, I think, very compelling data. Some of it is obviously thematic. You're going to understand that there's a correlation between educational attainment and income, but there's a lot more to that story, especially as the impact on the state of Michigan beyond just the individual resident level. So we were a little bit late to the game. We were one of the last states, if not the last state in the nation, to actually have an official state policy aiming for an educational attainment goal. It was one of the first actions taken by Governor Whitmer in the first few months in that role. And there is certainly very strong rationale for why we should have a goal of increasing attainment. We have made progress in recent years. We've crossed the 50% line mark, 51.8%, but still below the national average. We're 34th in educational attainment at the four-year degree level. And I would note that we're 35th in per capita income nationally. That correlation is not a coincidence. And I'll show that, the correlation between educational attainment and income is certainly the case at the individual level. It is also the case at the state level. Very strong correlation. States with low educational attainment have low incomes and vice versa. There are just a couple of exceptions nationally. So our state's Bureau of Labor Market Information and Strategic Initiatives, every 2 or 3 years, they do a comprehensive analysis on the top 50 high-wage, high-demand jobs. And it's key to talk about both, not just high wage, but also high demand. And they look at the top 50, and they released their latest analysis through 2032. And the highest figure I've ever seen in tracking this report, they're now up to 42 of those 50 occupations, or 84% minimally require a four-year degree. That's pretty remarkable for Michigan having its industrial skilled trades passed. And so that speaks very strong about the labor market demand for individuals with at least a four-year degree. So our friends over at the Detroit Regional Chamber do a lot of good work, working with a lot of other entities in the state on promoting a high-skilled workforce. And they challenge themselves to try to come up with one graphic that tells the story about the value of a college degree and the labor market demand. And this graphic really encapsulates that. When you look at good-paying jobs, those paying $65,000 or more, 66% of those jobs go to those 35% of Michigan residents that possess a bachelor's degree or higher. That's the good news. The not-so-good news is only 35% of Michigan residents cross that $65,000 a year threshold, but it's 2/3 of our population that do not have a bachelor's degree. So we need to try to change the way that graph looks as we move forward here, and thus the increasing argument to make even better progress on our state's educational attainment. This is a very common chart, just showing annual income, or in this case, a weekly median income, based on educational attainment. So yes, the more you learn, the more you earn. This has been a steady, a consistent chart over the years, over the decades. But it's not just about income, it's also about job security, especially during down economic times. And so greater mobility and job security, the higher you go on educational attainment. So, I've been working with higher ed for about 30 years now, started in career services and did a little work in admissions, and maybe it's just a matter of getting older, but a common refrain is get a college degree and you'll make $1 million more over the course of your lifetime. There is now a tool. It was released a few weeks ago, first time I've ever seen such a tool by the folks over at the Georgetown University, Center for Education and the Workforce. And they took all of the best available data, mostly all at the federal level, and they now have a tool to look at the return on investment of a college degree over at 10, 20, 30, 40-year intervals for 6,400 institutions. And the key here is net of the price of attendance of attending those respective institutions. You look at Michigan's 15 public universities, and here's the data. So after you back out the cost of attending these universities, slow out of the gate, $188,000 after 10 years, but it balloons after that. $750,000 at 20 years, 1.3 million after 30 years. And after 40 years, essentially over one's career, we're now knocking on about $1.9 million return on investment for an undergraduate degree. And this data is about 3 years old, so they're probably already there. And I think that's impactful. So a very strong return on investment for individuals who graduate with a 4-year degree at a Michigan public university. So I really want to emphasize here, and I think it's important to not just speak to higher personal incomes that benefit individuals, the tax revenues that those individuals generate to states, but also on the flip side, there is a correlation as it involves educational attainment and the decreased need for governmental spending on public assistance and social insurance programs. I thought that one of the more interesting, I think, fiscally conservative studies that I've ever seen is one that was done, albeit a few years ago, 2017, that tried to encapsulate the net fiscal lifetime impact for individuals based on educational attainment in this country. And so they look at all types of lifetime taxes paid, federal, Social Security, state, property sales, you name it, that's key, but then backed out all of the public assistance programs, state and federal, Medicaid, food stamps, school lunches, cash assistance, you name it, as well as social insurance programs, unemployment, disability, you name it. Not in here, I see listed is corrections, for example. And what this study showed, you know, the numbers really, it's really just the correlation here. These numbers are going to be outdated for sure. But when you look at, again, that lifetime net fiscal impact, so you take all the taxes paid, back out public assistance and social insurance, you see that correlation, more than $380,000 of a net positive impact for individuals with a bachelor's degree. And of course, this has a 3% discount rate to try to factor in inflation. So really want to emphasize that bottom line there, that increased college attainment generates greater tax revenue, but it also reduces the need for governmental spending in other areas. So let me turn now to a key issue affecting Michigan. It's certainly been of focus in the last few years, and that's our demographic cliff as it involves our diminishing youth pipeline. It's interesting, we've been dealing with this issue since 2007. It's an old story here, and yet nationally, it's really hitting the mark now. In the weeks ahead, this nation is going to have its highest high school graduating class ever in history. And then it starts to go down. Again, for Michigan, we've seen the decline since 2007. So we're not alone. We're looking at about a 20% decline over the next 15 years or so. But so is the rest of the American Midwest and Northeast. And actually, to my surprise, is what has happened, and really it just seems just the last 5 years or so in the entire Western United States. And so I think this tells the story as we focus on boosting enrollment, boosting attainment. We can't do, what we've done, which is essentially pilfer a lot from Illinois, everyone is now competing and fighting with each other. And we in Michigan are a net in-migration state, as involves college enrollment. That's good, but that competition is going to become more and more steep with other states and regions around the country. And so you see here, again, we have the 6th largest forecasted drop over the next 15 years, and this is on top of everything that has already happened, the double-digit decrease we've seen over the last 15 years. But, very important, always want to focus up that demography is not destiny. There are many programs, initiatives, dials to move at the institutional level that can make up for a decreased number of high school graduates. And all the bullets you see here, making admissions easier, closing achievement gaps, enrolling more stopped-out students, working adults, improving time to degree completion, improving graduation rates, closing achievement gaps. Our sector has very positive data over the last 5 to 10 years on all of these measures. And so when you move that dial just a little bit on all these areas, you can make up for what is a declining number of high school graduates. So let me turn now to the second part, probably the shorter part actually, on comments on higher ed funding and specifically the FY26 budget. Very important context, given that almost all of you are new to your roles on this subcommittee. It's really important to have the context here of what has happened with public university state operating support over the last 20 years, especially also in the national context of state funding. In 2001, we were 20th in the nation, in the middle of the pack in terms of per capita state support for higher ed, and we have plummeted now to 41st in the country. So we're only 2/3 of the national average. And if you look at post-Great Recession, we haven't made it back. We're still about $370 million below that level in terms of state operating support for the public universities in real dollars. And since the high point in 2002, we're $1.2 billion below where we were. So what has happened over the last many decades is a general state-to-student cost shift in who pays for a Michigan public university education. The universities have 2 primary funding streams, state operating support and student tuition dollars. And back in 1979, only 30% came from students and families, 70% came from the state, and that has more than flipped. A mere 22% of those general fund dollars come from the state. That's pretty remarkable. For context, if you were to look at today's pie chart, nationally, it's about 53% coming from students, 47% from the states. So here is a bar chart showing what has happened with state operating support for the universities over the decades, adjusted to current dollars, and you see it's been a gradual decline. And we really need to. It's been a little bit more steady the last couple of years, but our goal is to not just stop the bleeding, but to make a major reinvestment. I would note, you probably can't see that, the copy of the slides are in your folder, but I would note, and I'm going to turn here to some very positive news. We have a great story to tell here in recent years in terms of state financial aid. But it's notable that given a variety of factors, that college attendance, net college attendance at a Michigan public university has actually dramatically increased in the last several years. Now, part of that is increases in institutional financial aid. This data doesn't even reflect the Michigan Achievement Scholarship. But the improvement actually comes from what is a refreshing metric, and that is increasing household income in Michigan in recent years. So it shows here between 2019 and 23, the average net price of attending a public university declined 8%. As a percent share of household income is actually dropped by 25% during that time frame, from 28 to 21%. And that is, again, prior to the Achievement Scholarship. So in 2 or 3 years from now, if we were to show this, odds are, barring significant unforeseen circumstances, that the net price of attendance, when all forms of financial aid are taken into place, it's going to improve even further. So I think that really needs to be emphasized because there's a lot of focus, especially in the popular press, about skyrocketing tuition, the cost of college. We have made gains here in Michigan with the partnership of our universities and the state. Here, notable chart, we were very pleased that Michigan over the years has invested very well in its community colleges. They're about 121% of the national average for state support of community colleges. That's great. We commend that. For the public universities, the stories are different. We're about 70% of what states typically fund their public universities throughout the country. So we would like to, again, another argument for increasing operating support to make improvement in that area. So let me conclude with our primary funding request for FY26. One is, and we've been very consistent with this over the years, we need to make improvements. We cannot afford to lose ground. We need to do better than a simple inflationary increase in operating support. We commend the governor's out of the gate recommendation, executive budget recommendation of 4%, but our request is 4.8%, which is double CPI. We've been requesting double the rate of inflation increase, which comes up to $83.5 million. After that, simply a continued build-out of the Michigan Achievement Scholarship. That has been, I think the most often refrain is, a game changer in this state. It has made this state one to watch in recent years. Right now, for the public universities, we have 34,500 students receiving the Achievement Scholarship. That's 58%, nearly 6 in 10 students receiving it. They can get a maximum award of $5,500 a year for up to 5 years. For that population currently receiving the award, the average has been $5,200, so we're not too far off the bat. That $5,500, that is a discount off the rate of tuition of between 29 and 42% among the public universities. That's a significant impact. When you look at the 7 members of this committee, as it involves the Michigan Achievement Scholarship, we have 1,039 receiving the Community College Guarantee, 2,549 receiving the 4-year Achievement Scholarship, 3,500, more than 3,500 total students receiving the award, and then overall $15.5 million of those MAS dollars going to students, residents in your district. I'm not sure if she's here, Michelle Richard, Deputy Director of MyLeap. I want to commend her and her team. It's one thing to have that Achievement Scholarship. It's another thing to execute it, administer it in coordination with the federal government and the FAFSA, market it, and thanks to the Michigan legislature, we do have now significant marketing dollars. And so it's been a good rollout, despite some hiccups last year at the federal level, and the uptake continues, and we want to make sure that the build-out continues, the visibility for that program continues in the years ahead. That is probably the single biggest factor to not only improving college affordability, but in improving the post-secondary participation rate in Michigan, which is the hardest dial to move. But we've seen it have an impact in the first 2 years, and I think that will increase. And then the last thing is a request for campus infrastructure improvement dollars. The acronym is ITEMS, Infrastructure, Technology, Equipment, Maintenance, and Safety. Not this year, but the last fiscal year, the 2-year and 4-year institutions received some dollars for ITEMS. We were happy with that. It was the first time in more than 20 years that those dollars were received. Our public universities are some of the most important public state assets we have in Michigan, and we need to preserve those. It's not just about new buildings, it's about preserving all of the things that are often invisible to the eye, that preserves these universities. And so we did a study just a few months ago of our institutions. They have a collective $6.44 billion in deferred maintenance needs. And so they don't strike the threshold, not even come close to what would be a capital outlay project. You really can't get donors to fund HVAC units and new elevators and, you name it. And so we our ask is $100 million this year and subsequent years, which is the equivalent of 1.6% of that deferred maintenance backlog. But we think it's a prudent investment. And just for some context, over the last 4 years, I've contacted my counterpart in our friends to our south in Ohio. They have averaged close to $240 million every year to the public universities for essentially items dollars. So one thing not on here that is part of our agenda is also sustained investments in capital outlay, a few project authorizations every year. We know that's not the purview of this committee, but we do have a sort of articulated elaboration of these three priorities in a brochure that is in your folders that also speaks to the need for additional capital outlay investments. So when you add up these three primary funding requests, they ultimately will lead to increased college affordability, enhanced academic quality, and improved student success. And that concludes my remarks. And with that, would love to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hurley. Representative Rogers.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your presentation. As someone that has a district that is with the Kalamazoo Promise, we are blessed with free college tuition, but other districts in our state are not. So I really appreciate you talking about the value, especially. I think that return on investment is incredible, especially as time goes on. Also proud of you mentioned that we're not exactly at the top for R&D funding, so really proud of working with my colleagues across the aisle on a bipartisan R&D tax credit package last term, which passed and just went into effect last week. So very excited to see how that rolls out, and hopefully that can help you get some matching funds. But my question is, we may need to be faced with some difficult decisions coming up funding-wise because of some of the potential cuts at the federal level, which then pass through to states. What do you see as a policy-wise, or what area do you think we need to focus on in terms of state funding? You touched on the Michigan Achievement Scholarship, as a measure of success, and you don't quite have all the data yet as it's a newer program. Is there anything else we should kind of be zeroing in on or uplifting, in your opinion?
I think I've largely covered it here, and that is especially when you look at the long-term, short and long-term ROI. I think the number one goal, your jobs are fascinating. You impact every aspect of Michigan residents' lives, but there, I don't know. I just lost my train of thought here. But the ROI, that was it. The top goal would be economically to increase per capita incomes. And I think the surest way to do that, of all the investments in the state, is to increase educational attainment, and especially at the bachelor's degree level. And so I wouldn't recommend where to turn to cut, but I would say it's very important to have the fortitude to continue to invest in the institutions and in student financial aid. To not do that will have, I think, a much more dramatic impact on personal incomes, on the workforce, and our economy compared to cuts in other areas of the state budget.
Thank you.
Representative Roth.
Yes, sir. Thank you for your testimony. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. Do we have an average of what the four-year university per year cost is right now?
So we have like our tuition is probably around, I'm going to say, the $14,000-$15,000 mark. We have an annual tuition reports right on our website, massu.org. I will say, and I touched on this earlier, but when we, I think a really important message to the Michigan public, and especially prospective students and families, is that on average, average being a key word, the net price of attendance is actually about 45% of what the published price is. Okay, when you factor in federal financial aid, the much improved, greatly enhanced state financial aid, and then the more than $1 billion a year in institutional student financial aid that the public universities put together, you add all that up, and it's about a half off discount. And we need to get that message out to Michigan families.
Thank you.
Representative Longjohn?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your presentation today. I have actually 3 questions. One is really quick. Of your 15-member universities, have any of them recently won the national hockey championship?
Yeah. I will say it was great to see, but you know, there's always a little competition in the state, whether it's Michigan State, Central Western, and in the campus stakeholders we've talked to this week, this united state front in terms of joy, happiness, pride in what the Broncos did last week.
Let the record show he didn't mention Western Michigan University by name. My other questions are more serious. Thank you for entertaining me. The first is, I noticed in the ROI chart that you shared with the new tool that's available that it's in 10-year increments. Obviously the achievement gap, the achievement scholarship will have an important impact on that ROI calculation for folks as costs are changed. But I'm wondering, in those first few years, you said it was slow out of the gate to see an ROI. Does the tool allow us to look at 1, 2, 5 years out? And my question ends up being related to kind of a first destination question. What percentage of our graduating students end up finding a first step in a career within that first year or two? What does that first year or two look like, not just from an ROI standpoint, but from kind of managing the cost of education? And a corollary to that, and this is my last question, is you mentioned that we are a net importer of students, essentially. What percentage of our graduates stay in Michigan? And again, that's kind of related to that first phase of careers, too, please.
Yeah, those are data points that I'm going to probably have to get back with you on. I do know it's actually a requirement, federal requirement, that institutions do a survey of their graduates. And I think we've got good results. I actually had a dinner meeting last night with several of our career service directors. And for many of the universities, it's 90-95% plus in terms of landing a job, specifically in their field. But yeah, there's, and it's going to very much change, well, not actually a little, there's some change depending on major, but for a lot of the academic programs delivered by our universities, the growth in income continues to grow. It might be slow. I've got 4 degrees, and one would argue they're sort of all kind of broad-based: education, public policy, public administration, you name it. So they're not STEM. But for those types of majors, I think maybe this is a little bit different than the skilled trades in that the earnings just continue to escalate through mid-career and beyond, as opposed to, starting high, but then, sticking with that. So I can see if there's some data among the 15 institutions that I can get you. And then also in terms of the percent staying in the state, I don't know that of a general figure. We did a survey in collaborating with the MEDC probably 6-7 years ago that took a look at why former Michigan residents were out of state and what would it take to compel them to come back. And a lot of it, I mean, I'd say the great majority is economic opportunity. There are other issues we can't control, like the weather, but there are other things that are helpful, such as, just simply family ties and whatnot. And then there's the argument of the chicken and egg. What comes more in terms of, economic opportunity, but you need talent. Talent, capital follows talent. So, and we've seen a really good story here in terms of what's happened in Detroit and Southeast Michigan over the last 10 years or so. So, yeah.
We're good. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Hurley.
You bet.
We appreciate your
Thank you.
Yep. Representative Roth makes a motion to excuse all absent members. And seeing no further business, we are adjourned.